Welcome to Sales is Not a Dirty Word, the podcast that shows you how to convert 8 out of 10 sales conversations without acting like a douchebag. I'm your host, innovative sales coach, Aleasha Bahr, the creator of the Black Sheep Sales Method. Because if it's a fit, it's a fact, and there is no selling involved. If you're a service provider selling your own service and you're ready to sell differently than the mainstream status quo and win more sales without pressure, pitching, or pretending to be someone else, then this is for you. If you want to know more about the Black Sheep Sales Method, then go to Aleashabahr.com. This episode is with Gwen Bortner. Gwen has 4 decades advising executives and entrepreneurs across over 45 industries, helping women align their businesses and their true desires for sustainable success without sacrificing happiness. She identifies overlooked bottlenecks and crafts efficient solutions. On her podcast, The Business You Really Want, Gwen empowers visionary women to build fulfilling, value-driven businesses. And she has such a unique perspective on operations that it was hard, honestly, to decide which topic to talk about today. So I'm very excited for you guys to meet her and hear a different approach to something that so many visionaries hate, operations. Let's go. Welcome to the big show. Sales is not a dirty word.
Thank you for having me, Aleasha. You're right. Most visionaries absolutely like operations. I'm afraid like four or five people just said stop, go to the next episode. But really, it's not that bad. We can make it better.
Totally. And I mean, if you're going through, we talked a little bit about the growing pains that I'm going through. And a conversation that I had yesterday with somebody who's going through the same. Like when you start, you don't have SOPs documented anywhere.
No.
Because you just do them and then you bring someone on and they're like unable to do what you do because there's no documented system for it. And so then we all document it. And then guess what, guys? It doesn't work. And you're like, what am I supposed to do? Am I taking crazy pills? I'm doing the thing everybody said I should do. I'm writing it down and they're not able to follow it because there's all these if-then scenarios. And I need you to be able to use your brain and keep the eye on the end goal of it, even if every step in scenario isn't in the SOP. Because if it is, then that SOP is like 40 pages long and really hard to follow. So I can't wait to hear your perspective on this, Gwen. When this is happening, like, how do you recommend a better way to set up systems, SOPs? Like, let's start with your definition of an SOP, because honestly, that alone was different for me. It was a reframe.
So a standard operating procedure fundamentally is a behavior. It's the way of doing something. Now, a documented SOP is different because that means someone else can see it. But I have solopreneurs say like, I don't have any SOPs. And it's like, oh yeah, you do. You have all sorts of things that you already do a certain way or mostly a certain way. And so you have behaviors of how you're going to approach things. And for me, the definition is first, you have behaviors. Do you have consistent SOPs? That's before we document. Like, are we doing things consistently time and time again? So that's issue number 1. And then issue number 2 is, do we have documented consistent SOPs, right? Mm-hmm. And so until you understand there's actually layers here that we're dealing with, often people are trying to jump to the documented SOP and they aren't even thinking about these other more base layers that are going on, which is often where a lot of the frustration comes from. Because because often what I find is people try to document the SOP the way they think it should be, as opposed to the way that it is.
Okay, that's interesting. Can you give me an example? Let's give an email. Okay, putting together an email in like an email software that you're going to send to your marketing list.
Yeah. So you may think it should go through these, 5 or 6 steps. I'm going to write it, then it's going to get edited, then it's going to get reviewed, then it's going to get posted, then it's going to get scheduled. It may be all of these things. And the question is, are you actually doing all of those things? Or are you not doing all of those things? And when you say I'm going to do all of those things, so I'm going to document them, it doesn't actually necessarily change your behavior, right?
Mm.
So if for me, I actually am a horrible writer, like really, really, really bad writer. Mostly because I write the way I talk, and I don't think I talk really that good. I'm not gooder at talking. And so I know I need someone else to actually edit it, because like I'll do things like putting in periods and things that really are fundamentally very basic.
Which make it hard to read the thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so I know that I need someone else to do that. But most folks that are early stages, they're doing their own writing and editing, but they say we need to have an editing step. Well, if you're not really doing an editing step, then don't put it in there.
Yeah.
Right, because that's putting an extra step in. But my process does include an editing step. I write it, and one of the things is, do I actually schedule it or do I not schedule it? Do they schedule it? There's lots of little subtle pieces of what are we doing versus what we think we're doing versus what we actually say we're doing, right?
Is it kind of like do as I say, not as I do? Like that issue with parents and children?
Yes, exactly. And this is a situation where we need to start with do as I do. Right? Because when we try to do something that's not really, I'll say authentic. I kind of hate that word because it's getting thrown around.
They ruined it. People ruined it.
People have ruined it. But if we aren't really doing what we're doing, then it's throwing off all of the other aspects, because then we can't ask ourselves, why do we do it that way?
What an interesting question that people are not asking when creating their systems. Why do I do it like this? Do I do it like this because it's easier? Because it's faster? Because
I'm an excellent writer, because I'm, an English major, because I'm worried that the person who's supposed to do the thing won't do the thing. I'm going to keep using this email example because this is what happened earlier in my business. Is I would always schedule the emails that I send out every week to my clients. Okay. Right. I would go ahead and make sure that they were scheduled, because the person who was supposed to review and schedule sometimes would forget, not get to it, and then it wouldn't go out. And all of a sudden, like it's supposed to go at 6 a.m. Pacific time. And all of a sudden it'd be like noon on that day. And I'd be like, because I get a copy of it as well.
Yeah.
It's like, I haven't seen it. Crap. I go in, it didn't get sent, and like, right. All the things. Right. So I created a system to solve a people problem as opposed to actually having the system. Now I have someone who's amazing, and by me scheduling it, they have to unschedule it, do their thing, and then reschedule it. And then it's like, did I already do it? Because it's already scheduled. I mean, it was more confusing. And so once I got a good person who was actually able to do the process the way that we want them to do it, I realized I could take steps out. But the question I had to ask myself is, why was I doing that?
And it was because the person in this scenario.
In this particular scenario, it was the person. It was like, oh yeah, that's not actually the way we should do it.
And so the person is in the wrong seat.
Person was in the wrong seat.
Okay. So this leads to like the other conversation we were having, which was like that operations is often about people. So if you have a system and it worked for you and it's not working for whoever you're handing it off to, is that a sign that maybe you have the wrong person, or is it a sign that the system is the issue?
Could be either, but my experience is 80+% of the time, it's usually a people issue. So either they don't actually understand what they're supposed to be doing, they aren't really capable in the truest meaning, like can own the responsibility and all of the other things. Or a third, which is a kind of a variation of both, is that they don't understand why what they're doing matters and how it fits into the bigger picture.
Okay. So,
Because sometimes understanding what that whole piece is like, oh, now I understand why this has to be done this way this time in these forms. But when the people don't understand why, a lot of times the other two things can come into play.
so then would you recommend on your documented SOP to have an explanation at the beginning? This is why this matters.
Yeah, do I have it here? Yeah. This context matters. This is my number one business value. Context matters. Because that's how we work with our clients. But it also matters for understanding why you're doing things. So it doesn't have to be this big, long, dissertation. but understanding what this context is of this task or this SOP really does provide insight to
Mhm.
whoever's doing it. And part of it is the why. Why is it important? Why are we doing it? Because what I've also found is when people start to do that, sometimes they can't answer that question. And then it's
Oh.
like, oh, well, then do you need to be doing this at all?
Hmm.
Because sometimes we get caught doing things because at some point there was a why, but now the why no longer exists.
Hmm.
Right. And everything that we can eliminate is always a win in your systems.
Oh, I
The
agree.
simpler, the betterer is one of my favorite little sayings. And so the more we can eliminate, the better it is. And so if we can't have a really, I'll say, semi meaty why, maybe it could go away completely.
Okay. And would you recommend also having, if this doesn't happen, like what impact that has?
Yeah, because that's really part of the why. That's really
Okay.
part of the why. Of, if we don't do this, then this can happen and this can happen and this is where where it becomes a problem and why we care and why we matter in our particular business and our particular delivery and in our particular values, um, within the business.
Okay. So, with the email example, why does this matter? Because consistency in front of our clients creates trust, which creates client retention. If it doesn't happen, we look like our shit isn't together. And
Yep.
that makes people not want to work with us, which could ultimately decrease revenue.
Yep. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And, for me, one of the whys often is we work really hard at walking our talk. And because we do a lot of things fundamentally in the operations side of the business, if our operations aren't working well, um, why would you think that I could help you think well through your operations?
Yeah, totally.
Right?
So, okay. So when you document it, just asking yourself, why are we doing this? And what happens if it doesn't, can help you understand if you even need to get rid of it. And you want to document what you're actually doing.
Hmm.
And if somebody isn't doing it, how do you find out that that's a person problem or a system problem?
Always by asking what happened, not why. Okay.
Okay.
Um, why feels accusatory and what is about the process? What is
Mm,
about the thing? Why is about the person? So when you start
okay.
asking what happened, then you can start hearing, were they behaving inappropriately, person
Mm,
issue, or did they not understand, training issue, or
mm,
did something in the system actually break that we never thought about before?
mhm.
I mean, there's a whole lot of things that go on, but when you ask what, you actually get better answers than when you ask why. Because when you ask why, people will naturally start to be a little more defensive.
Okay. So I have a scenario that I think could be helpful for everybody listening.
Okay, great.
So I'm onboarding EAs right now. I have now split the job into two because I have struggled. Like, I think that maybe part of the problem is that there was too much for one person to do. So let's
Mhm,
have two part-time people, right?
mhm,
And the tasks are clearly split between them. And something that has chronically been an issue is I have ad hoc stuff that comes up all day and I send it to them to take care of because I'm usually in meetings the majority of the day and it's hard for me to do. And um things get missed. They get missed that I send, and I have to be like, oh, why didn't this happen? What happened? What happened? Right. And so this happened the other day because they asked me, like, what should I do? This person's asking for a meeting. And I said, send them this link. And it just never got sent. And at the end of the day, I was like, oh, what happened? This wasn't sent. And they were like, oh, I was doing something and I got distracted and I forgot. And I'm sorry. And I was like, okay, what can we do so that doesn't happen again? So, like, what would work best for you? Like, how your brain works. Like, what's going to make it so you don't miss it? Like, it doesn't matter what I think. Like, what do you think? Is that right?
Yeah, I love the way that you approached it. And there's 2 or 3 things that like went off in my head as you were giving this scenario. So the first was saying, so what would need to happen so that won't happen again, right? If they say it was just a mistake, it won't it won't happen again, then okay, fine. But then this is also where I start watching for people issues, because if it happens again, this is now a people issue, not a process issue.
Okay.
Right. And my approach is, the first time something happens, I'm always assuming that, something broken, it was my fault as owner of the business. Right. The second time the same thing happens, if I'm hearing anything that feels like the exact same issue as before, that's my warning flag. And I will say, this concerns me because, and then the third time it happens, we're actually having a very serious conversation.
Okay.
Right. Because that means it's a people issue.
Yeah.
And I can't fix a people issue.
No. Yeah. Well, so that's often, and then it's like, am I asking too much of people? Is what has always come back to, like, am I asking too much? Am I not being clear enough?
Yeah, if they can't tell you that you're asking too much, it's still a people issue on them, because you can't get them to tell you you're asking too much if they won't tell you that they're asking too much.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we have a lot of folks that are people pleasers. Like, I'm just going to keep saying yes and keep saying yes. And it's like, well, no, that's actually not helpful for me. And if you can't tell me you're overburdened, then I can't fix it.
Yeah, so there was this other wild thing that was happening with a previous EA where, like, I would be like, okay, can you move this example? Can you move this meeting so that I can make time for this client who's having an issue and is a priority? So he reached out and rescheduled the meeting. Never booked the client with the issue into the time that had now been freed up. And I'm like, should I have to tell all of those pieces? Like, it seems like a natural, it's like, I go to the bathroom and I wash my hands. Like,
Right.
I moved the meeting so that I could free up this time for this client, and now I book it with the client. Like, is that a people issue? Or
so it can be a people issue. And here's the thing I find that happens a lot with folks as they're bringing in VAs, EAs, OBMs, the list kind of goes on and on depending on what level is. We often are actually bringing in people at too low of a level for what we need to start out. Okay. Because bringing on your first person, or, first 1 or 2 people, is very scary, because now we have mouths to feed, as it were. Right?
yes.
And so we tend to say, let's look for something pretty entry level, pretty low level, doing all of those things. But here's the piece that kind of no one ever talks about. And I've actually said this different times in public, like, your first person you hire probably should never be a VA. And people are like, what do you mean? That's what everybody says. And it's like, It's like, no, because a real VA, someone who's at a lower level, actually needs you to give them every step of the process. They are about doing the thing.
The task.
And as a solopreneur, visionary, entrepreneur, all of this just makes sense in your head. And exactly what you said is exactly true. It's like, it seems freaking obvious. How on earth would you not then put the other piece in? But a lot of folks, that's not if they're really a VA, that is not how their brain works. It has to be said, move this appointment. Once that's moved, reach out to the other, make sure you fill it in. And it's like, I don't have time for that. Right.
Right.
And so what often you need is someone who's a much higher level, which is
Right.
way more expensive,
Right.
because they're going to do that entire problem solving process.
Yeah. So I have hired higher level ones that have operations experience, but that still happens. And my theory now is that it's because I've only had men. And men don't have to juggle multiple things on
Yep.
multiple plates and, like, have that foresight kind of, like, it's just something in
Yeah.
how
No,
we're
could be.
raised.
Absolutely.
So, I'm like, "I need a mom. I need a mom with children." Like, she's gotta keep her practices in line, and she's gotta think about, like, how
Mhm.
this lines up and who's picking up who and, like, how it all affects each other and, like, that where's the person in the 1950s where the executive just showed up and, like, his secretary was like, "Here's the notes for all your meetings today. Here's your coffee. I've already sent your Aunt Millie a gift for her birthday. I moved that meeting with that guy, Greg, because I know you don't like him. And be ready at 4 to go to your kid's baseball practice." I'm like, where's that person?
Well, and that's where I talk about that is a true executive assistant, but a true executive assistant, you need to be planning on paying 85, 65 to $90 an hour for.
Yeah.
And most people are like, "Oh, I can't possibly do that." And I understand that.
Yeah.
And you may only be paying them an hour or two a day, where the VA that you're paying
All
20 or
the hours.
$30 an hour, you're paying 5, 6, 8, 9, 10 hours a day. And it's like, it may actually be the same
Even
price or
out.
cheaper.
Because the executive assistant is so efficient.
Exactly. And you don't have to spend your time getting them up to speed. You don't have to spend your time. They know how to get information out of your head without you having to get it out of your own head.
Yeah, because so often we're like, "I don't know all to that you need to know."
Right. Right. This is why I very much am about, your first person probably should be a higher level person. It's scary as hell. I'm not denying that at
Yeah.
all. But that being because they know how to get enough of the information out of your head instead of you having to figure out, how do I get it out of my head? Because the lower level person really, no offense to anybody, but they don't understand what the questions are they need to ask.
Well, and they love a checklist.
They love
Like,
a checklist.
they
Yep.
love to just check that thing off and say, "Ooh, pat on the back, I did a good job," and it's like, you've lost sight of the end goal.
Yep.
Like, you needed to follow up on that. You needed to bring someone in on that. You needed to, because the end goal of it was not met. You sent the email, but they never responded, so it doesn't count, you
Right.
know? Like
Yes. Yes,
so
exactly.
yeah. So who do you recommend that they hire first, and, like, what questions should they ask that person?
Well, so the higher level person is usually either an executive assistant or an OBM. And our friend Ashley who has an OBM service,
Yeah.
gave a great example of what the difference is. And so I'm quoting Ashley on this. I'm giving her,
Okay.
full
Yeah.
credit,
Yeah.
which is an executive assistant's first priority is you as an individual and making sure that you are protected from the world in the way that you want to be protected from the world.
Okay.
Okay.
And if you don't know how you wanna be protected, they can figure out how you wanna
They
be.
often can figure out how you
Okay.
need to be
Okay.
protected. Okay. And OBM, meaning an online business manager, or you can call it an office manager, if you're um,
Brick and
in a
mortar.
physical environment.
Yeah.
Um, their job is to protect the business and do what's best
Mm.
for the business.
Mm.
Right. And so they're trying to look at what's going on with the business and making choices based on what the business needs, not necessarily what you as CEO need. Because sometimes they're going to say, yeah, you need to do this. Sorry, too bad. So sad.
Yeah.
Where the executive is like, no, 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 we'll make sure you don't, you don't have to do that. Right. So most solopreneurs really probably need someone more at that OBM level, right? That can see a bigger picture of what's going on with the whole business, back to understanding not just the items that need to be done, but why they need to be done and how they affect a few of the other things, and can see more of the context.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I really need both. I need someone to tell me this is what you should be focusing on for the business. Do this, not that.
And often once you get an OBM in place, then they can hire and train a VA who can do the low level work, because they can actually pull it out and put the task list together. Right? Because often it's not, I mean, early on, you want them doing the task list, because part of doing the task list is figuring out, is that actually what we need to do, or do we not need to do half of these things, right? So there's a stage early on where the higher level person doing activities that may be, kind of above their pay grade or below their pay grade, really makes sense, because it's not just about doing it. It's about seeing the whole picture, right? But as soon as it's like, oh yeah, this is what we're really trying to do, then they can potentially bring someone in at a much lower pay scale to say, do this, do this, do this.
And they can manage them, because
they can help manage them. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the other concern that's coming up for me that maybe some listeners are thinking. People call themselves OBMs. How do you know someone is actually got the skill set of an OBM?
You have to be asking them strategic questions when you're interviewing them, as opposed to activity questions.
Okay. Can you give me some examples?
Asking them, giving them very specific examples and say, this and this happens. What do you do?
Oh, if then scenarios.
If then kind of scenarios. So, and let them see what questions they ask, what they need to know, how they, and what you're really wanting to do is start seeing, how does their brain work? So you want to ask them, how does their brain work questions. And one of the things that I always do in this scenario is I will also ask them a question that's a how does your brain work question that has nothing to do with work. Because we know what the right answers are. When we talk.
Like, give me an example of a question that you ask an OBM.
One of my favorite things is to say, have you taken any sort of vacation in the last, year or two? And often, usually there's something they'll say, so tell me about how you went about that.
Like how
because when you think about vacation, you don't think about it as work, but you can say, oh, well, so my husband and I talked about it, and then we decided we wanted to do this. And then I made these reservations and I thought about this. And you start understanding because how you approach vacation is exactly the same way though how you approach work.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, maybe we could also ask planning a party.
Planning a party. Yeah. I mean, like there's all sorts of things, but things that are not work related.
Yeah, I just had to plan my daughter's party. And I was like, you know what? How cool would it be if my kid's party, I just got to show up? My husband just gets to show up. He didn't have to do anything. And it would be different if I liked it. Like my mother-in-law's like, oh, I love it. I'm like, how cool for you. I hate it. I hate managing the RSVPs. I hate making sure that we have all the food and the right head count and like getting, like all of it. It's like my nightmare. And so I could see, I remember I was ordering some like Paw Patrol themed plates and stuff. And they were like, also you get a party planning like guide with it. And it showed that you're actually supposed to like a month out do this. And then like 2 weeks out, double check head count. And then 5 days out, make sure that you've gathered all the supplies. And then 3 days out, get dessert ready. And I'm like, oh my God, like I'm not doing any of that. Like I'm flying by the seat of my pants. Like if somebody asked me that question, they would be like, I cannot hire her for this job.
Right.
The OBM job.
Right. Because quite honestly, I mean, I love you, but you would suck at an OBM job.
What? But I could do it if I tried really hard, but I'd hate every moment of it.
You'd hate every moment of it. You'd be miserable. I mean, like I've got someone that works for me that we kind of started, and it's like, oh yeah, you're not good at this, but you're really good at some other things. We're going to put you in doing some other things.
Yeah, like let's not do stuff we don't like doing. I don't want you to do stuff you don't like doing. Like, let's do something you
Well,
love.
because you're never going to win, right? Because they're not going to do their best work. They're not going to be happy. You don't want people who aren't always happy and doing their best work. I mean, obviously not everyone's happy all the time, but it's not like, oh my God, I have to go in and do this job that I really hate. We don't need that.
No.
Our teams are way too small to be able to absorb any of that energy.
And I care about you. Like,
yes,
as a human, like why? I want you to be happy.
Yeah.
So you said instead of an activity question, so that's the last thing I want to ask. Like, what is an activity question so people know not to ask that one?
An activity question is, what tools are you familiar with? Now, I'm not saying that you don't ask those, but you don't only ask those. We get so caught up on what you've done before, what tools you've used, all of these things. But the truth is, if you know how to use Outlook, you can figure out Gmail.
Also with ChatGPT, anytime I can't figure out something, I'm just like, hey, ChatGPT, how do I do this thing?
Right. I mean, so long as they have some familiarity. I've never been on a computer. Okay, that's going to be a problem. But
well, that's our presidents. None of them were, neither administrations in the past, have 8 years can be on computers.
So, but they also don't really need to because they have huge staffs that all know how.
I don't know. I feel like I could argue that
we probably could argue that, but I mean, this is one of those things. If it's a fundamental, function of
skill
your
set.
job,
Yeah.
we need to make sure that they can do that. But skills we can train, behaviors we can't.
Right, and it's
So
not always
an interview for behavior.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's a good stopping point for us. And I think what's so interesting about this is that operations very much extends to people, and the difference, and I hope anybody listening can understand, ooh, am I trying to address a system issue that's a people issue, and knowing that both of them are part of the overall system and under operations.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes the reason you can't fix the system is because of the people, and sometimes the reason that the people aren't working is because of the system.
Right. So I love that you have such a breadth of experience in helping people uncover which is which. I hope that you guys feel like you've gotten some clarity into how you could maybe figure something out that isn't, if it's not happening now, might happen in the future. Not that I'm wishing that juju on anyone, but like, let's just be real. It's pretty inevitable.
It's going to happen.
Yeah. So we've reached the end of yet another episode of Sales is Not a Dirty Word. Thank you, Gwen, for making an appearance as our guest today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Can you tell everyone how they can find out more about you and how they can work with you?
Yeah, you can hop over to everydayeffectiveness.com. And from there, there's lots of places where you can reach out to us. I'm also most likely going to see you on email or LinkedIn. And so my LinkedIn profile is, the LinkedIn profile, Gwen Bortner, pretty easy to find. I don't think there's a lot of Gwen Bortners on LinkedIn, so you can pretty much find me on search. And my email is gwen@everydayeffectiveness.com.
Okay, you guys, I would definitely recommend talking to Gwen. She's a straight shooter. She has so much experience to really, pick apart what's going on in an area of your business that can be very difficult to diagnose on your own. So highly recommend going and connecting with Gwen. And if you found this valuable, please share, like, subscribe. Those things mean they just make such a difference. And thank you all for listening. Until next time.